in 2019, the first time capsule buried by Stumpy Sanderson and his gang of mischievous working-class boys, and which was actually an old Watney's Party 7 can, was unearthed. Then in 2023, the second time capsule, which was an old Courage Jackpot Bitter Party can, was discovered. And now, Whistling 5 Anarchic Productions, in conjunction with the 1970s Cigarette Appreciation Club and Puffer Patterson's Benevolent Fund for Aging Thespians, proudly presents Series 2 of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s stories, and the 22 stories found in that second time capsule. As narrated by Andrew Brammer. Bonjour, bon après-midi, et bonsoir. The story you are about to hear is narrated in the first person, because I, just like Stumpy, witnessed firsthand the momentous events which it describes. So, let's park up the rally chopper, dim the lava lamp, switch off that episode of Catweasel, finish up the plate of Vesta beef curry, crack open a can of Double Diamond, light up a mannequin cigar, and kick back, sit back, and listen in to the anarchic and outrageous japes, scrapes and capers of Stumpy Sanderson and his gang. For this story, we head back to 1975 for Hard Boiled Stumpy. Mrs. Critcher, that razor-tongued gorgon of a French teacher, with the withered walnut face, whiplash hair, and nutcracker nose and chin, was the deadliest shot of all with a blackboard rubber. On so many occasions had she launched one of these lethal projectiles from the front of the class, and we would all watch in awe as the wooden and rubber dart rocketed through the air like a blue steel nuclear missile, and then loudly clonk into the head of the intended miscreant target. Sometimes, if she had spotted more than one offender up to no good in the class, she had even fired two at once, one from each hand, like some bizarre circus knife thrower. Stumpy and I, along with a few others of our lot, had been the targets of these missiles on more than one occasion. And it was after we had both again been the target of such a deadly double assault, after making the whole of the back of the class giggle loudly for writing deliberately convoluted sentences in which, rather than using simple character names such as Monsieur Delhomme in one of our French comprehensive exercises, we instead used the long names of our favourite Indian spin bowlers, Monsieur Chandrasekhar and Monsieur Venkataragavan, that Stumpy decided something needed to be done about Mrs. Critcher. However, that was easier said than done, and plotting a successful campaign against her was like trying to come up with a scheme as intricate as that used by Edward Fox in The Day of the Jackal. Stumpy and I racked our brains in vain for weeks. Our fortunes were eventually to change, though, when we chanced upon some invaluable information imparted to us by that well-known informer and snout, Baxter the Snitch. A shifty, rodent-like boy in a beige rainmack, with dark, close-cropped hair, who operated in the shadows and shade, smoking old Hoban roll-ups, watching and obtaining information about people. We chanced upon Baxter as we were walking home one evening and were taking a route by a row of lock-up garages. Hearing and seeing a match struck, we heard the unmistakable shady voice of Baxter as he emerged from the gloom. "I hear you two are trying to hatch a plot against old Critcher." "That's right," said Stumpy. "Anything you can help with?" "Well, I've got some information that will give you an in. But it'll cost you 2 marathon bars and a packet of tobacco." Stumpy and I looked at each other. "OK, deal," said Stumpy. "But this better be worth it." and how that information was worth the sum we paid out. For we learned from Baxter intelligence that was to prove invaluable. Goodness knows how he had managed to find out what he told us. But one of the golden rules about using a snout was that you never asked where or how they had obtained their material. We heard that on the dot of every Tuesday lunchtime, Mrs. Critcher shot out to the nearby Key Market's supermarket and the greengrocer, and always bought half a dozen eggs, some mushrooms, and most astonishingly of all, some herbs and garlic. Baxter also told us that this was because every Tuesday evening she cooked for her husband a type of omelette even more exotic than the one cooked by Michael Caine as Harry Palmer in the Ipcress file. What was most interesting to us, though, was when Baxter told us that, after putting her shopping bags in the boot of her green Morris Minor, nearly always with 40 minutes or over of the lunch hour remaining, Mrs. Critcher never locked her boot when leaving the car in the staff car park. So now we had some vital intelligence, and it was Stumpy who came up with the brainwave as to how we could best use it, as we mulled and kicked over possibilities on the way home from school. "I've got it," said Stumpy. "All we need for this is a kettle, one of those older ones without a cut-off switch." And as he explained his brainwave to me, I realised the genius of the plan. So, the next Tuesday morning, when I knocked for Stumpy on the way to school, he had in his Gola sports bag the kettle which we had picked up from the local scrapyard. Our whisked-up plan went like clockwork. As we both loitered around near the staff car park at lunchtime, we saw to our great fortune Mrs. Critcher, still with well over 40 minutes of the break remaining, drive back into the car park, park her Morris Minor, and sure as eggs were eggs, indeed, leave it unlocked. We couldn't believe our luck. Making sure no one was around, we then scooted to the car, and, while I kept watch, Stumpy opened the boot, and from the top of the carrier bag took out the box of half a dozen eggs. Putting them in his Gola bag, we were now in business, and we still had a huge amount of time before afternoon lessons. Quickly darting to B block, we entered through the back door, having already prefixed the latches so that the locks were easily opened, and entered the totally empty block. Running to the toilets, we filled the kettle with water, ran to the plug sockets which were under the main stairs, opened the kettle, and put each of the 6 eggs into it, and then switched the appliance on. "Right," said Stumpy. "A good 30 minutes or so will do nicely." As we only had the soft Mr. Crookshank in first lesson after lunch, it didn't actually matter to Stumpy and I if we were a bit late for his lesson. So we used this opportunity to boil that kettle for even more than our targeted amount of time. Even as we saw the caretaker unlock the block door, and then walk off to do the same to another block, we continued with our bubbling, seething, and steaming. Then, when the first teachers and pupils began appearing, we switched off the appliance, darted back to the toilets to empty the scalding water, put the eggs back in their carton, and, as everyone was now coming into the block, we casually walked out of it, back to the staff car park, where we reversed our previous operation and put the eggs back in Mrs. Critcher's Key Market's supermarket bag. In our French lesson the very next day, Mrs. Critcher seemed to be even more unpleasant than usual, with a look of suspicious and growing thunder on her face. Although she obviously suspected foul play, there was no way that she could act on just a mere whiff of suspicion that someone was responsible for her culinary disaster of the night before, about which we learned a few days later from Baxter the Snitch that her exotic omelette meal with her husband had ended up as a far less glamorous and rather unpleasant to the palate hard-boiled egg salad. Thank you for listening to this episode of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories. And please don't forget to check out the other stories from Series 2 and Series 1. You can also follow Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories on Facebook, where you can keep up to date with all the news about live shows and other Stumpy events. There's also the website, www.stumpysanderson.co.uk, and the Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories YouTube channel. And you can get in touch with me at andrew@stumpysanderson.co.uk. Until the next story, au revoir et bonne nuit, and keep grooving.
Yeah. This podcast has been recorded using a DIY punk rock philosophy. Yeah.